anything controversial or any substantive policy changes with the exception of the Cosmetology Board, who is here. And one more, Mr. Chairman. In December, the Veterinary Board did meet. And as I told you, ANI was aware that this change was coming, and I did ask if there were any other changes needed. They did have a meeting in December with the Board of Veterinary Medicine, said, hey, if you're doing it, we would like a small change, I believe from 5 to 3 years, and that amendment was hopefully passed out to you in front of you. And they are also here if you wish to ask them any questions on why that change would be needed. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Committee, any questions? Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Zwanitzer, in this, are we including both those boards funded by the state and those that are self-funded?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that, and Representative Burkhart, I believe that's correct. Some are state-funded and some have private, what we call special revenue funds that fund their operations.
Follow up.
Chairman Burkhart.
So, Chairman Zwanitzer, a question's come up over the years, and I just wanted to know if we kind of addressed it here, which is with the Medical Licensing Board and when they give the ethics exam. I thought we fixed it where they can take the exam online or take it more frequently. It used to be only once every 6 months. Did we address that? I'm just curious because I've had doctors, dentists, and that say, hey, I would have moved to Wyoming, bought a practice, except I come in like 2 days too late to take the exam and I'd have to wait 6 months. And I was just wondering if we inserted that in here also.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhart, I believe we did. And so what also we've had happen the past 4 years is we've had a large number of what we'd call compacts, compact acts that are going to be coming where we have reciprocity with other states. And so we have gone through some of our practice acts and made sure that we had reciprocal agreements. And I'm fairly confident that we've done 4 or 5 in the last 2 years. And I was certain this was going to probably labor health in my committee and we were going to address all those, but I will double check for sure, Mr. Chairman. If that's not correct, maybe an amendment on the floor would be in order.
Thank you.
Follow up?
No, I'm good.
Committee members, any additional questions for Chairman Zwanitzer? Seeing none. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind just kind of hanging around just in case there are follow-up questions. Thank you. I would imagine there's gonna be some state agency testimony from these licensure boards. So any state agencies? Please come forward. And just a reminder, please go ahead and state your name and who you're with, please.
I'm Sharon Bennett with the Board of Cosmetology. I'm not sure testimony is required. I did send an email, but I would be happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Committee, any questions? Can you say your last name one more time again, please?
Bennett?
Bennett, okay.
Yes, this, Mr. Chairman, this is just, we were looking at moving to computer-based testing, and we discovered this one line. So that's what we're trying to fix.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see if we have
Question.
anybody else. Oh, Chairman Burkhart.
So, please, Ms. Bennett, if you'd wait just a minute, don't run away. We're friendly. You said you're going to computer-based testing. Do you also require a practical test? And if so, to me, you couldn't do a practical test over the internet, so to speak. So could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. During a lot of things changed during COVID. And one thing that changed for the positive, we believe, is that some of the practical exams were made into a written practical. So they are tested on that practical experience, but in a written exam. And by doing this, the biggest reason we're looking at this is our board administers the exams now. So we only test every other month. So if a student graduates the day after that exam, they're a month and a half prior to being able to get their exams done and get into the workforce. The board was able to view this written practical and believe that it does a really good job of testing those practical skills. They're confident that if they choose to move forward in this, that the students would be able to test as soon as they were done in school. They would not have to travel to Cheyenne in January or March, and they could get into the workforce right away.
Any follow-up? Committee? Thank you very much, Ms. Bennett. Again,
Thank you.
maybe just hang around just in case we want to bring you back up. Any other agencies? And please just state your name and who you're with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Joanne Reed. I am the administrator for the A&I Professional Licensing Boards. Several of the bills, as Representative Swanitzer mentioned, are ours. So if there's any specific questions to those, I can hopefully try to answer those for you.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Any other agencies that would like to testify? All right, let's open up to public comment. Anybody from the public? Must be a hot topic. All right. Seeing none, we will close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
No. Oh, you have a question? No.
Oh, you
Move the bill, sorry.
moved by Representative Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Sang. Any discussion? Any amendments?
Question?
We do have an amendment here that was distributed by Representative Zwanitzer. We need to move the amendment so we can discuss it. Does everyone have a copy of the amendment? Representative Winter?
What are you asking?
To discuss the amendment, we need to move it for discussion.
I just have a question for Chairman Wannister.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Wannister, and maybe you can't answer this, but relative to the dentistry board, can you tell me why the profession of denturist is not in that statute? Or what would it take to get there?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Winter, it would take a statute change. I actually brought that bill in 2006. Since then, I believe it's been brought at least 4 or 5 other times. And as I said, committee, the Dental Practice Act, allowing denturists in under certain circumstances gets really contentious. And so everybody wants to protect their territory. And I think the 4 or 5 times that bill was brought to the legislature, it did not pass any time due to the concerns of general dentistry, that denturists as a profession were not licensed to the standard they would like. And so that has been tried many times in my tenure, and it has just not made it all the way through.
Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I brought that once or twice myself. So I guess in my experience thus far, and from my knowledge of what's going on with denturists, it seems to me that they are providing a good service for the dentist themselves, and saves them a lot of time, and it, from my experience, they're doing a pretty good job. And so if you have any suggestions about including denturists in this and getting the bill passed, I would appreciate it.
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Winter, obviously my preference would be that this bill in front of you is hopefully not controversial. I would suggest there is another bill coming over from the Senate that involves dentistry. I'm going to get myself in trouble. That hypothetically you may look at amendments to that bill. Should you wish to pursue that, that would probably be the more appropriate, germane place to do so.
Representative Winter, any follow-up?
Mr. Chairman, I would move amendment House Bill 76, 4301.
It has been moved. Is there a second? Seconded. Any discussion? Sensing the urge to vote, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. That amendment is adopted. And we are back on the bill. Committee, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Donitzer, I'm just curious about in the hearing aids section, whether you guys looked at any changes that needed to be made given the change in federal law recently.
Mr.
Chairman Swanser.
Chairman, Representative Storr, there's also another bill dealing with hearing aid board and those issues that is coming from the Senate as well.
Okay.
And so while I think that was briefly discussed, that would be what I consider a more significant policy change. And I was happy that it was being addressed in another piece of legislation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Representative Storr, any follow-up? Any further discussion? Question being called. Barb, will you please call the roll?
Representative Angeles,
You don't,
Aye.
Chairman.
Representative Burkhart, sorry.
Aye.
Representative Byron,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Western,
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Newsom,
Excused.
8 ayes, 1 excused.
That bill passes. Chairman Swanser, I assume you will be managing this in the floor? Excellent. No promises. All right, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 104, Hunting of Predatory Animals Amendments. Excellent. Representative Haroldson, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of TRW House. I sit before you today and bring you House Bill 104, which is the Hunting and Predatory Animal Amendments. To kind of paint the picture of what we have going on right now, currently in the state of Wyoming, it is legal to hunt predatory animals at night on public land. What is not legal is to use any source of lighting or device that would help aid in vision at night. So I'll give you an example. A moonlit night on a snowy day or snowy evening, you could go out and shoot coyotes in pitch black or in moonlight and go coyote hunting. This may sound okay. My deal is, part of me kind of is terrified over the fact that we are at night in the dark hunting and not able to see what's downrange. Normally that wouldn't be an issue, obviously. On a moonlit night in snow, you're good. Well, Charolais cows are white. Coyote hunting at night with a white cow in snow tends to be a problem. And so this is coming before you now with the intention to fix that. I don't believe that it's this state's right or job to tell people that they can't hunt predators at night on public land. But what I do believe it is to free them to use the proper tools at their disposal and technology to give them that opportunity. So this, I feel, in a lot of ways, is lining our statutes up with the technology that's available today. So the bill would give the Game and Fish the ability, and with a Game and Fish amendment, they're going to be bringing a proper ability to propagate rules for the use of thermals, night vision, and artificial light. It will open up our public lands for night hunting for predators. I gave you guys a handout that gives you guys just a kind of an overview of what some pros are on this and some things, the states that have actually gone ahead of us and legalized this on all lands. And then just some of the ideas that I believe maybe have been questions that have been asked. And I think these are the answers to those. So In essence, that's the bill. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for Representative Haroldson? No, seeing none. Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Harrelson, would this bill affect private land hunting of predators at night?
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Winters, no, it would not. Those currently, you can legally hunt predators on private land with any of these devices that we're talking about, as long as you have written permission from the landowner, and that would still hold true. So nothing changes on private land. This only addresses and affects public land.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none. Representative Haroldson, let's have you stick around just in case. Any state agencies? Director Nesvik.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brian Nesvik, Director, Wyoming Game and Fish. The Chief Game Warden and I, Rick King, are going to tag team here this morning with some perspectives from the department. So first of all, Representative Haroldson did a great job of running through the bill. As we understand it, he has reached out to the department over the past few weeks to solicit our input and talk to us about what our concerns are, and we certainly appreciate that. I wanted to start off with some kind of general thoughts that I think that are nuanced about this bill. First of all, understand that when I talk about our concerns with regards to protecting our big game resources, mainly big game resources in the state, it's really born out of the expectation we have from our constituents to be over vigilant on how we look out for those big game resources. There's very few days that go by in my life where I don't hear from somebody in Wyoming about how concerned they are about our big, incredibly important and viable populations of mule deer in this state that are actually in decline. And so a lot of my comments are prefaced in that public trust doctrine that we certainly operate under. So one thing I think it's important for the committee to understand is we do not have the regulatory authority under current statute to regulate predators. And so this is not about regulating predators. It's about regulating specific methods of take that are currently provided under statutory authority to the Game and Fish Department under Title 23. I think while I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the illegal opportunities that we're always concerned about, please know that the overwhelming majority of folks that would take advantage of this opportunity, if this bill were to pass, have absolutely no intentions of engaging in nefarious activity or trying to poach our big game animals. But we have experience where folks look for those that have those bad intentions. The very, very few are looking for ways to new openings to make it easier for them to take some of those really incredible resources that we have in our state. Back 10 years ago, I would say, I sat before the TRW committee. Wasn't the same members. There's none of you that were here then. There were some of you, let's see, yes, one of you was in the legislature then, but I think the rest of you were not. Representative Burkhart was here then. And we talked about silencers. And at that time, my testimony was, you know what? We're concerned because right now, sometimes wildlife violations are detected when especially a private landowner, hears the report of a firearm, and they report it when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you hear a firearm, and the landowner didn't give anybody any permission, or they hear it on private or on public land, they report it, and it gives us an opportunity sometimes to apprehend people that are up to no good. Over the last 10 years, what has played out, we have not seen an increase that we can detect anyway of violations of the law that have occurred because silencers were legalized by the Wyoming legislature. And in fact, many hunters have taken advantage of that opportunity for their own hearing protection and for their own abilities to have youth use higher power rifles without the recoil. I've actually now shot in a silenced rifle myself and see that there is quite a difference. And so frankly, my testimony today would be, or my testimony then would have been different if I know what I know today. But I'm testifying today on what I know And I know that there are folks, unfortunately, that will use and take an opportunity to use any opportunity they can to take wildlife illegally on public and private land for that matter. With all that said, I wanted to offer just one personal example, and please know that when we're done here, Chief King is going to talk about what we think is an amendment that would give us comfort in being able to address these concerns through commission regulation. The bill currently allows the commission, gives the commission authority to do to take some action through their rulemaking process to be able to regulate this to a level I think that that we could live with it. It was 22 and a half years ago, so I was a young game warden, and I was out, had information that a group of people had been out doing exactly the kind of activity that I just talked to you about. And at the end of the day, after many days of following these guys around, I was able to watch them shine a light at about midnight on public land off of a highway. And I heard 3 reports of gunshots from 3 miles away. And because this bill because the current authority was in place for the Game and Fish to be able to stop people that are running a light on public land with a firearm, it gave us the reasonable suspicion, the legal presence we needed to be able to eventually secure convictions for folks that had been out shooting things for several weeks, and had identified 14 individual animals that these folks had, taken in with the use of artificial light in the middle of the night. And so again, I offer these examples so that you understand why we take our charge very seriously to look out for the protection of our wildlife in the state. I think it's also important, like I said, if this bill passes with this amendment, I think we can work with it. But I don't want there to be anybody that feels like the Game and Fish didn't do an adequate job of articulating our concerns. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Chief Game Warden and ask him to talk about a few finer points here.
Mr. King.
Thanks, Chairman Western, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Rick King. I'm the Chief Game Warden for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and Chief of our Wildlife Division. And I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to follow up a little bit on what Director Nesbitt said, and just let you know that as Chief Game Warden, it's my job to worry about Wyoming's wildlife. And that's why my hairdo is the way it is, because I worry about Wyoming's wildlife. And I just want to point out a couple of concerns that we've identified. First and foremost, I think that in our agency, we spend a lot of time talking about hunter safety. And I think that this type of activity comes with some consideration that should be given to the safety of this activity. It's already been pointed out that this can be done on private property right now. And I think when you're talking about private property with written permission, you're talking about landowners who know their property. They know who's coming on to do this activity. They know where livestock are located. They know where power lines are. They know where pivots are. It's different. And so this kind of activity, if this bill were to move forward, would allow hunting at night with this new technology on public lands where that kind of knowledge may not be known by the folks that are going to participate in it. So I think a safety concern is something that should be taken into consideration. The other consideration I'd share with you is what Director Nesbitt's already brought up, and that's our concern for Wyoming's wildlife and for those 1%ers of folks that have ill intent and want to steal Wyoming's wildlife. I think that there should be some consideration given to what this bill may allow somebody to do under the alibi of being covered as pursuing predatory animals versus other animals. I think that like Director Nesbitt mentioned, we do have an amendment that I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking through. Before I get to that, I'd just bring up one other consideration in that we are fairly short-handed right now. We have a lot of vacancies amongst our game warden ranks. We're trying very hard to get those filled, but we are a little short-handed in those folks that are out there protecting Wyoming's wildlife. I think if this bill moves forward, one of the things that Director Nesbitt will hear loud and clear from me is a request to equip our wardens with similar technology that folks will be utilizing. I think that's going to be pretty expensive for our agency, but if this bill moves forward, I think that'll be critical that our folks, our game wardens in the field have technology available to them. I think that's going to cost a chunk of change, but that'll be a request I'll be making of Director Nesbitt to make sure that our game wardens have the tools that they need to counteract the one percenters that may be up to no good. If it's all right with you, if we could talk through the amendment.
Please do.
So the suggested amendment that I'd like to discuss would be to just make a couple of modifications. And really the thought behind this, the genesis of this would be to help provide the Game and Fish Commission and the department some clarity about what the legislature's intent is and what you want the department and the commission to regulate. So it'd just be simply adding a little bit of language that would specify what the commission would put into rules and regs through the rulemaking promulgation process. So it would add one word in page 3, line 13, add after rule, add regulation, and then page 3, line 17, at the end of the existing bill draft, we would suggest adding this sentence. The addition would read, such specifications may include, but are not necessarily limited to, creation of zones, areas, valid dates, and methods for taking predatory animals with the use of artificial light or lighting devices on public land. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. King. Committee, any questions? Representative Storer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Warden King, you may have already answered my question, but in light of Director Nesbitt's discussion of chasing some poachers for 3 days, I guess my question is, how confident are you that you have the personnel and resources available currently, even with new equipment, to be able to police this appropriately?
Chairman Western, Representative Storer, that's a good question. I appreciate that. And I will tell you, we have a lot of vacancies right now in our game warden ranks. It's unprecedented. In Director Nesbitt and I's career, we've never been in a place like this where we have vacant districts and we're having a tough time getting folks recruited and trained and put into place. So I don't want to portray that it's all doom and gloom, but I can tell you that our folks are feeling the pressure of a significant workload that is not shared by as many people as it should be right now. I think that our folks work really hard and they'll do the best they can, but that's certainly one of those things I worry about is the workload that we have on our existing personnel.
Thank you. Follow up?
Follow-up, Representative Storer?
Thank you, Chief Warden King. One other question, just about thinking about how you can police or how you can manage the use of this equipment on public lands. We all know that our ungulates, many of our ungulates are migrating during the hunting season, and hunters know that, and so do the predators. So I could see some real conflicts developing, certainly during hunting season, where predators are active, but also the public is very active on public lands. Is that kind of what you're thinking about, like what kind of limitations you would probably want to try to put on in different areas? I'm just curious what you're thinking there.
Mr. King?
Chairman Western, Representative Storer, yes, that's exactly the things that I think this would contemplate for us. And the suggested amendment would make it very clear for the commission that they would have the authority to establish some valid dates where the use of this technology is allowed and maybe some dates where it isn't. I could envision the public wanting to chime in about whether or not a person should be allowed out on September 30th or October 14th, those nights right before a major big game opener. Perhaps those are some dates that this could be prohibited, and that helps address some of the concerns that we have and that members of the public may have.
Any follow-up? Any further questions? Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. King, how much of a workload will this add to the overworked wardens and your staff already?
Chairman Western, Representative Burkhart, it's really hard for me to say. As I mentioned, the workload experienced by our game wardens right now keeps me awake at night. And so I'm very sensitive to it. It's hard to say. Our folks are going to be out and about anyway. Hard to quantify what additional workload this may bring, but I do think that there could be some additional workload with this.
Any follow-up?
Mr. Chairman, not necessarily a follow-up, but a separate question. Thank you.
Please.
So for the bringer of the bill or the commission, Game and Fish Department rather, so at what distance with this equipment can you discern the difference between, say, a young coyote and a gray fox? Because the gray foxes are fur bearers under the rules, where a coyote isn't.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, so the best way to show is I'd love to show you a video of this process and what it actually looks like. The first generation night vision and stuff was sketchy and scary at best, and where we're currently standing, it's daylight. It's just everything's in different colors. I mean, it's pretty impressive. Now, one of the things to talk about to address some of the stuff that came up, because of this technology in the hands of anyone in this room that would like to purchase it, no game warden would ever know who's out there doing this currently. They're not turning a spotlight on. So if we're being 100% honest, I believe in a lot of ways this could actually help our game wardens, because if we put a whole bunch of law-abiding citizens out in the field with this technology and they see someone doing something nefarious, we now have eyes in the field that could say, wait a second, I saw someone out there and I saw them take down a big game animal. Where honestly, the fact that Game and Fish doesn't have this technology now is probably an oversight on our part. We should have probably already taken care of this for them so they could look out into that field and see who's out there. But this is, I mean, I would say a majority of people will not be using a spotlight. I don't even know, like, you can't even buy that stuff anymore. I mean, people are buying IR, thermal, imaging scopes and imaging devices. And so, I'm not trying to sound mean when I say this, but a game warden can drive around all they want. They're not going to see people out in the field with this equipment. The only way to see people in the field with this equipment is with this equipment. So there's that. The other thing is I'll stand with that for now. I think that probably answers that question. But the truth of the matter is you can definitely see very clearly, Representative Burkhart, what you're shooting at.
Follow up,
Representative
Mr. Chairman. So from what you had said, Representative Haroldson, instead of this bill, would we be better off just running an appropriation bill to give all of our wardens night vision equipment?
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart. So at that situation, we're still having it very legal for me to go out with a firearm at night and shoot. And so we had the report that, you know what, we're concerned, a private land, there's a private landlord giving permission for people to go out. They know where the pivots are, they know where the cattle are, they know all that stuff. Currently, I can go legally out tonight with my high-powered rifle and shoot as much as I want on public land. And that might be pivots getting holes, that might be cattle that don't make it through the night, because we don't have a mechanism right now to protect those assets with this night predator hunting. And so we could give them that asset. We could just do an appropriation to give them that asset. But at the end of the day, it doesn't actually address the problem that is before us right now.
Follow up to that.
Representative Burkhart.
So how does not giving them additional equipment cause a problem?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhart, the problem that is right now is the fact that you can legally hunt at night on public land with no lighting device. this would give us the opportunity to continue to legally hunt on public land, but it gives us a device that creates a safer atmosphere and environment. So that's the issue I'm talking about. Now, it's a completely separate issue, I feel, of if our wardens have this technology to protect our big game animals. Another argument is the fact that more predators that aren't living in the realm of coyotes, more mule deer that are living, and sage grouse and others that we're trying to protect. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, although you didn't answer the question.
Any further questions from the committee? Representative Storer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, either from the sponsor or the agency, other public land states that do regulate and allow the use of this. So I'm understanding, Representative Haraldson, that we do allow the use of thermal infrared currently.
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Representative Storer. So currently it's only on private land
Okay.
with permission from the landowner. But if you look at the handout that I gave you, that top bullet point has all the states that currently have it legal on both public and private land. So these are all the states that have already gone where we're looking at going.
Thank you, sir. So,
Thank you. Follow-up?
so, yes,
Representative Storer?
please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's not legal in the state of Wyoming on public land currently. And also, I'm asking if we have any evidence from any of the other public land states that have allowed the use of this equipment in terms of whether poaching went up, whether there's any evidence and what that evidence might be.
Representative Haraldson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Representatives. So if you go down to the second from last bullet point, you see a Pennsylvania Game Commission asked 34 states that allowed the use of night vision and/or thermal imaging whether the equipment accounted for problems with illegal activity. 19 of those states responded. None of them believed that the tools contributed to poaching on any significant level. So we have no proof at this point that it has created a poaching problem.
Follow-up, Representative Storer?
I sense that Director Nesvik
Yeah,
has
Mi-
follow-up.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storer, I was just
Director
gonna,
Nesbitt?
I was just gonna corroborate what Representative Haraldson just testified to. I mean, we have talked to some other states and we haven't, we don't have any evidence from other states that legalization of this type of technology on public land has increased illegal take.
Follow-up?
Thank you. No, that's it.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Any other public testimony? I guess we can start with public testimony. Let's go ahead, please. Again, please state your name and who you're with. Thank you. I go green light and you're good.
I think he's okay.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Chairman and committee, my name is Mark Jones. I work for Gun Owners of America. We're an organization that represents 2.5 million Americans. We work to protect the Second Amendment rights as well as hunting rights. I live in Johnson County, Wyoming, where I live and own farmland and property. I am the national director for Gun Owners of America's hunting outreach program and hunting programs representing all 50 states. I'm also a certified wildlife biologist, and I have been one for 27 years. I am a retired Fish and Wildlife Agency biologist with 3 decades of experience in these matters. And for 15 years, I sat on national committees of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which is the organization that represents the North American Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So basically, I have some experience in these matters. I have sat in the rooms with gentlemen like the Director Nesbitt and Mr. King and had these discussions as a biologist and as a research biologist with game wardens about how we manage wildlife. I'm very familiar with this process. And you have to have a balance with this type of thing, and I understand that these gentlemen are concerned with big game herds in Wyoming. I'm sensitive to that. I want to put some perspective on things. These restrictions make 1/2 the state of Wyoming off limits to this activity. And that is the only place that many people have to hunt. Many people do not have the luxury of going on private ranches and hunting. So there is an issue there with hunter opportunity. 34 states allow this practice, as Representative Harrelson's already pointed out. All 6 states that border Wyoming allow this practice: Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Farmers and ranchers would benefit from this practice. If you take in predators off of public land adjacent to private land, would benefit livestock operations, as Representative Harrelson's already said, would benefit mule deer populations, sage grouse populations by giving hunters the opportunity to take some of these animals. There is no evidence, as we've already heard, that illegal activity has increased in states that have allowed this. That evidence simply does not exist. Even blue states like Illinois, Connecticut, Massachusetts allow this practice. Here we are in the cowboy state, Wyoming, and we're restricting our hunters from access to one half of the state. And when we look at that as a freedom issue in some respects, as a liberty issue, when there's no biological justification to do that, there's no evidence, there's no data that desirable wildlife populations will suffer from this, it's kind of hard to justify denying opportunity to that many hunters. Half of the physical area of the state's off limits, and for many people, that's the only place they can hunt. So Gun Owners of America supports this legislation, or this bill. We believe it's an issue where there's no biological justification for the current restrictions, where we would have more opportunity for cowboy state hunters to get out and exercise their rights to hunt and take advantage of the public lands that are available to them. So we urge you to move this bill through committee. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Committee, any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Ms. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jess Johnson, Government Affairs Director for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I want to sit down and talk with you first and foremost that we do very much support hunting of coyotes and support hunting of wolves. And in fact, we work to make sure that we have this for the long term. We feel like it's a right we want to see long term. I say this as a person who's held a wolf tag and who recently served coyote at a beast feast, much to the awe and shock of everyone that was there. So I say that when I want to talk about this because I recently spent 2 months in Scotland, and I was on an estate. I was working on red deer management and roe deer management, and Scotland uses thermal to work on culls. They do this because they have no predators, but roe deer are notoriously hard to see and find in thick cover. So they use these thermals to go out and spot them. They exclusively use them, at least most of the estate managers that I worked with, during the day. And they used them only to find these animals in the essence of a cull because they had an agriculture problem and these deer were wreaking havoc. I got to go out and do one of these. I got to sit behind 2 separate thermal scopes, one that was a pretty low budget one, and I had a really hard time telling the difference between what a roe deer versus a red deer was through it. It was blurry, it was hard, and the depth perception was really rough. I had a professional with me who was double checking everything that I was doing. He was far more skilled at it. But again, we would use this to find them, and then we could see, through a separate scope on a rifle during the day. I also got to look through a really high quality one. Those are a lot better. You can see a lot more. There's a lot more with them. So I had this experience of having done that. Granted, it was not at night. I don't know how that changes things at night, but what I saw during the day, I was pretty skeptical. Had I not been able to reassess with my own eyes what I was shooting at with the lower budget scope. Now, when you look at these scopes, I think the lowest budget one is about $1,000. The high-end one that I got to work through was $10,000. There's a huge difference in quality. And hunters, while we have some that can afford $10,000 scopes, not all of them can. and may rely on this sort of lower quality that's a lot harder to see and a lot rougher there. Now, I have a really big support of this action on private land. I think this is a landowner, they know their land, they know the divots where they can see things, they understand who's there. Hopefully, they know everyone who's there. And they have an idea, what's out there. I think the use of this for depredation, especially when you have single predators that are causing problems, makes a ton of sense. Like you need it. I think this is very helpful for them. But when we move this from talking about single predators causing an issue to talking about this as a need for predator management on public land, I think we missed the mark. Predators, yes, they have an effect on ungulate populations, but effective mitigation of that effect does not come from a few recreational hunters at night with scopes. It comes from a very coordinated and staffed by professionals cull, usually held during fawning or calving seasons, like very specific, tight times of year. It's essentially a blitzkrieg on a coyote, and that does change things. But a couple of recreational people doesn't change the management side on predators. In fact, coyotes tend to have, when you take out one or two out of a population, they tend to backfill that population with larger litters of coyotes, causing more predators on the landscape. It's a biological need for them. So when we move this from a utilitarian need on private land to a recreational need on the larger public land, I do think we change what we're talking about here. This inevitably gets our hunters into things that are murky ethics, a little bit of fair chase issues, safety of other public land users, both human and animals, and larger misidentification issues. We don't need to remind you that a woman shot and skinned a husky in Montana in broad daylight. Identification is a problem. And when you make it even more murky, we'll see more and more problems. So I think we do just fine with the technology that we have. We are able to manage predators and very effectively. We're able to hunt them any way we want to please across public land. This is not negating an opportunity to hunt. Let's see, excuse me. And I'm actually very grateful that we're having this discussion, because I do think that as technology changes, we're going to have to keep coming back to the table and asking ourselves all of these hard questions. I think every question I've heard today and both sides of this aisle have points, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion here. So I would say that we're pretty tentative on this bill. I would go so far as to say we would rather not see it pass. I do think it puts an inordinate amount of responsibility on our hunters that can sort of force the thing of like, when you're using this, you better have high self-awareness, a lot of restraint, and a heap of patience and skill. We also are putting our wardens into the position of now doing even more nighttime surveillance. These guys work 24/7. I've called the warden at 10 o'clock on Saturday, 5 a.m. on a Sunday, at midnight on a Monday, and every time I call, they answer, they show up, and they go, which is great, but they're also understaffed and overworked in a lot of this because they care and they show up to every time we call. So I would stand for any questions on this. I think, I hope I've not taken up too much of your time.
Any questions for Ms. Johnson? Oh, Representative Storer, and then we'll do Representative Angelos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jesse, I'm curious. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the difference or the migration from utilitarian use to sporting use, and we're thinking about what fair chase means for hunting, and how to make the use of these kinds of equipment fit into the idea of fair chase, and whether that should be applied in this arena.
Ms. Johnson?
Representative, so fair chase is nebulous, and I'm really hesitant to pull the discussion of fair chase into a discussion of legislation, because everybody's point of fair chase is different. It's ethics. It's how we approach things. I think generally accepted fair chase is when an animal has an ability to have knowledge of your presence, making the hunter have to work a little bit harder, be a little more highly skilled, and perhaps sneakier, and step into their own predator footprints. So I think the fair chase thing is hard. If you're asking me personally, having been behind these scopes before, I am torn on it. I think in the essence for management, in the call that I participated in Scotland, it made a lot more sense because we were looking for balancing of a depredation problem. Did I feel great about it? I had some questions. So I do think the fair chase thing is hard. I'm always hesitant to put something like that in policy, but I think that's where policy is important, is that it gives us the sideboards to what our ethics are.
Representative Angelos?
So I just want to reiterate, currently hunting in the dark on public lands is legal.
Mhm.
So would any light, spotlight, the artificial light, I mean, not everybody's going to use a thermal. They are expensive. Most people's budget's going to be a spotlight. But do you see that being any benefit to having any light at all hunting at night?
Ms. Johnson?
Representative, there is, and in the sense of, there isn't a benefit. That what I was going to say is that is legal on public land at night, correct? My feeling, and those I know that participate in this, are only doing that in broad, big, heavy, full moon, kind of reflective, where I would feel like even I might have a good rifle shot. And by putting this technology out there, I think we are going to see what is currently the practice of maybe just a few turn into the practice of many. And that changes the discussion on it. And when you add more and more people to a landscape at night, whether they have thermal vision consistently on or spotlights on, you do add, night is night. Safety will end up being a discussion. I don't know, hearing from other states that it's not an issue so much with the poaching or anything like that, it doesn't do a lot to make me feel much more comfortable with this as someone, who does, I go for nighttime skis and I hike in at night, and I do, the spotlighting thing is, I can't answer that probably very well.
Any follow-up? Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you. We're supposed to be back in the House chamber at 2:15, so if we could just keep our testimony a little on the short side, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bill Brenniger with the Wyoming Game Wardens Association. I think I only know one or two of you. Just to give you a little background, I am employed as a game warden by the Game and Fish, but I am not here in any capacity representing the department today. I'm representing the current employed game wardens through their association and all the retirees. So I've done this for about 19 years, so I'm tapping into my own experience as well as the experience of others.
Mr. Brenniger, could you get a little closer to the mic?
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Burkhart. So first I want to say we have a tremendous amount of respect for this process of drafting bills and regulations. We work down here when we can, and also through the Game and Fish Commission. I respect that process. Together, along with many public interests, Wyoming has done a great job of addressing ever-changing hunting technologies over the years. Several years ago, I worked with Representative Burkhart on some amendments to a technology bill, because we have the technology nowadays is quite amazing. But those were in regards to fair chase and hunting ethics. We must consider risk versus reward when we're looking at this bill. I myself am an avid hunter, avid gun owner. To me, this isn't a right issue. I don't have a right to do this. We have to look at it from a different
through a different lens. I want to go a little bit into the private versus public land issue. There's been some questions in regards to that I think I can help answer. Night hunting is currently allowed on private lands in Wyoming with artificial light. It gives landowners a useful tool on their lands to protect their interests. So they're generally, if somebody's hunting on private land at night, they're intimately familiar with where houses are, where livestock are, where vehicles are, where the neighbors are, where the highways are. So you significantly reduce any accidents. Landowners can be selective who night hunts on their property, which is significant. Even though it's legal, many landowners don't participate because they know the inherent risks with night hunting. I mean, it's a game changer. If any of you are hunters or own firearms, what do we learn in hunter safety? What's not just your target, but what's beyond your target. At night, even with the most advanced thermal technology, you can't always see what's beyond your target. Your field of view is shrunken. You have no peripheral vision. It's what's right in front of you, and you don't really see a lot at a distance. On public land, there's the argument's been brought up that 34 other states have this or allow this technology. I would argue that Wyoming's different. We shouldn't follow what other states do. We have approximately 34 million acres of public lands in Wyoming. We're ranked 7th in the nation for the amount of public lands. And you heard testimony the other day about Wyoming being a destination spot for recreators. That's all types of recreators. People can be on public lands at any time of the day or night. So where I'm going with that is if we allow this for one user group, you potentially jeopardize other user groups and their safety. And when considering rules and regulations on public lands, we must consider potential impacts to other groups. Unlike private lands where landowners can regulate the use of their lands, public lands are open 24/7, other than a few exceptions such as winter range closures, things of that nature. So you have no idea who could be out there. You're not going to be intimately familiar with. There could be a family camping. There could be a cabin with no light on. I think you guys get my point there. Public lands, and I can't stress this enough, they are managed for multiple user groups. You go to a BLM meeting or a Forest Service meeting, you're going to hear that word a lot. It's managed for multiple user groups. It belongs to all of us. The difference is private land, they can control who's there, they know who's there. You can't say that about public land. And one thing I want to stress that we've kind of alluded to today is there's already significant coordinated efforts on public lands through federal, state, and local interests, including landowner groups, to manage predators on public land. Ms. Johnson alluded to that. I've been a part of that with targeting coyotes on fawning areas for mule deer. To say that we need an additional tool like night hunting, which is going to be recreation, is really a drop in the bucket. There's already significant efforts. I want to go over some of the risks that we've come up with. The limited field of view and depth. I've used thermal, I've used the old night vision. It's terrifying when you're out there at night and you're on a piece of property and you know the piece of property, and then all of a sudden you're there at night with a thermal and you know there's a building over here, but you can't see it. Or you know there's a highway over here and you can't see it. With this bill, we are assuming that when we put this technology in the hands of the public, that they're going to think of all those factors. And I would hate to see a horrible accident happen, but that's the unknown with this. you can't see topography very well. You know, no matter what people say, using thermal imagery, it doesn't make night hunting safe. Even my military buddies that I've talked to, I asked, what do you think about this? Even in combat, in war, and they have advanced technologies we don't have available to us. It's not night and day. You still have doubts about your target and what's beyond.
Mr. Brenninger, I fully appreciate, your passion about this testimony, but I really want to try to get some other folks in. Just committee, are there any questions for Mr. Brenninger? Representative Angelos?
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I know it can be kind of intimidating to come sit in front of a bunch of people, but speaking to your concern of hunting and gun safety, people can currently hunt on private land and on public land at night in the dark. So do you feel any light, any artificial light would make hunting at night safer than what we currently have?
Mr. Brenninger?
Representative Angelos, I did want to briefly touch on that. I think the allowance of hunting with ambient light on public land is probably goes way back when I think the reason that's even so is because they figured people wouldn't do it because it was impossible. And now that we have advanced technologies, now it's become an issue. And all my years of a game warden, I think I've checked one person that tried to do that by moonlight. Not very many people do that. And I don't believe it'd make it safer. You still don't know what's beyond your target.
Follow up? Any further questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Brenninger. Any other public testimony? Folks in the room? Barb, I think we've got some folks online.
You have one person with a hand up, Nephi Cole.
Let's go ahead and let them in.
He needs to unmute and turn on his camera.
Nephi, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Nephi Cole. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for National Shooting Sports Foundation, the Firearm Trade Association of America, who represents the 9,000 members who are manufacturers, retailers, and distributors of all firearms, optics, and ammunition in the United States of America. I'm currently at SHOT Show, the Shooting Hunting Outdoor Trade Show, so I apologize for not being able to join you in person. And I know your time is tight, so I'll try and be very quick. So first, I'd like to say how much we respect Director Nesvik and the others, Rick, for being there. You have a phenomenal agency. They do a phenomenal job. And I really appreciate the drafters of this bill who made sure to leave the opportunity for the Game and Fish Commission to develop rules and regulations to make sure that this is done right, just like they do with all of the other many balls that they have to keep in the air over there at Game and Fish. They're a phenomenal agency. We're very proud that we fund them to the tune of about $20 million every year through the Pittman and Robertson tax, which is paid by my members. I would like to say, I think the committee needs to remember this technology is here and it's here in a big way. Everybody in the state has it right now. The fact that your Game and Fish wardens do not have access to it because of budgetary reasons, I think that's whatever happens to this bill, you should get those tools in their hands. And I'm committed to doing what I can to help make sure they have access to that. Because individuals do have these tools now. They can shoot and hunt predators on public lands now. As Ms. Johnson alluded to, this is not a fair chase hunting issue. This is for predator control. And just like Ms. Johnson was able to use these exact same tools to do culls and predator control to remove animals on a management basis on a hunt that she went on, the same should be true for other hunters on public lands in Wyoming. I would like to remind the committee that ranchers in this state utilize all of those public lands for most of for many of their grazing needs. Livestock don't just live on private lands, they live on public lands as well. And again, hunting on public lands or taking predators on public lands at night is legal right now. What is not legal is utilizing this technology that makes that process safer. Technology that's widely available, that people have access to, and that is absolutely legal right now. We support the bill. We support the Game and Fishes Commission's ability and their staff's ability to craft rules and regulations that are protective in the way that Director Nesvik has indicated is necessary. And we hope that you will move this bill forward. We think it makes sense for this state, the state of Wyoming, just like it makes sense for all of the states that surround Wyoming, which do allow this and do manage it in a proactive manner for the health of their desirable wildlife species. With that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Committee, any questions? Nephi, thanks so much for tuning in. All right, with that, we're going to close public testimony. You know, I'm trying to figure out if we should.
You can hold the bill over.
Yeah, hold it over till Tuesday. I mean, committee, is there a lot of discussion or working you guys want to do on this? Let's, Barb, if it's okay, let's just, let's hold this over until Tuesday. We'll kind of pick up where we left off, where we've closed public testimony, and we'll just come back and work it first thing on Tuesday. That's kind of my inclination. Oh, we do? Sure, quickly. We'll reopen public testimony. Go ahead and let him in. Definitely let him in. Devin, can you hear us?
Mr. Riley, if you want to unmute and turn on your camera.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
I don't know if you can see me, but can you hear me though?
We can hear you. Devin, I can hear you. Obviously, Devin, I know who you are, but if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just state your name for the committee, please.
All right. My name is Devin Riley. I'm a lifelong hunter, passionate coyote hunter. I've been hunting coyotes for the last 20 years of my life and just recently picked up a thermal scope. I've spent over $15,000 on the equipment myself. And I'll tell you guys that if you haven't messed with it, there's a heck of a learning curve to picking up a thermal scope. I would say, and I hunt them year round, 365. I have a full-time job, but I will miss sleep and do this stuff all night and then go to work, 2 hours of sleep. And for me, my biggest fear with this bill is that we'll be able to hunt on public land. There's going to be a big accident or someone gets shot or the wrong species gets shot or some accident happens. And then we close down thermal hunting for everybody where we can't do it at all. And I've listened to you guys' statements where you say that there's no proven poaching or any incidents with other states that allow this. Well, you guys have already said that that the Game and Fish doesn't even have thermal. So how do they even know? Because like you said, you can't see nobody at night. They whack a 190-inch muley, drag it to their truck or come back and get it in the daylight and they go back to their house. Who's the wiser? It's going to make, I would say for the hunting season, I would say you'd have to have some sort of limitation between August and December. So no one's messing with wildlife. And I do agree that wildlife is getting pounded all year long, all the stuff, but when do they get a break? And even coyotes, they get hunted hard. They like private landowners, they have their right to let whoever on and hunt them whenever they want. But on public land, deer are there, elk are there, everything in between, coyotes there. When do they get a break? So, I mean, for me being a coyote hunter, you're probably thinking, why is this guy saying this? Why wouldn't he want to hunt on public land? Don't get me wrong. I would love to hunt on public land. My biggest fear is that with all this being said, that one big accident happens and no one gets to do it at all. The one bad apple burns down the whole tree. So I think that's really all I have to say on the subject. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Riley? Seeing none. Oh, sorry. Representative Angelos, go ahead.
Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just knowing that it is legal to hunt at night and shoot a gun into the dark, is it safer to shoot a gun into the dark? Or is it safer to shoot with some sort of artificial light, regardless if it's thermal, spotlight, whatever?
In my opinion,
Riley, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Thank you for the question. In my opinion, I believe it's safer with thermal. And I say that because at night I've used spotlights and I've looked and you see eyes at 400 yards. It's hard to distinguish whether that's a coyote, a mule deer, an elk, a cow, whatever it is. It's unless you have the best light in the world, it's hard to distinguish unless they're really close. Where thermal, if you're trained, if you're seasoned, if you know how to control your heart rate and be able to take the time to judge what that animal is. A coyote has a distinct movement. They have a distinct look. I will say this, that an antelope fawn in the springtime looks very, very close to a coyote, very close. And same thing with house dogs. So you gotta have your wits about you and be educated and study your animal. And definitely, like people have said before, make sure you kind of know your surroundings and what's on the skyline. Don't shoot over skyline, but if you have that coyote there, what's behind it? If it's a solid hill, if it's a rolling hill into a ditch or whatever. But it just takes a little bit of education. And that's to speak back to the game warden deal. You're opening up a season where they're going to have to work for an extra 12 hours a day. I know they're already understaffed. They already have a lot on their plate. Now you're just opening up 12 more hours for them to work. And then you got to buy each one a $10,000 to a $20,000 thermal, just the scope, not even counting the helmet and the thermal for each eye plus night vision. You're probably talking close to $30,000 per person. And then you want to equip the whole state. And I don't know how many game wardens we have right now, but that's going to be a heck of a lot of money. Where I feel like if you're a seasoned hunter and you can hunt during the day, you'll get a lot of coyotes dead. And if you're polite and educated, you can talk to landowners, do some work, fix some fence, mow some yards. They'll let you on to hunt coyotes, just as long as you show that you're a good person and a steward of the land.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riley. So with that, I think we're going to close public testimony. Thanks again, Devin. I really appreciate you tuning in. For members of the committee, Devin's one of the toughest hunters I know, and I know he takes it very seriously and is a very passionate hunter. So thanks again, Devin. With that, we're going to close public testimony, and we're just going to carry this over to Tuesday, and we'll just work the bill the first thing on Tuesday when we come in. So we are adjourned. Thank you.